Hey, Masters of Speed, it's Terramaster, and joining me today because we're talking about toxic judgment. So it has to have the judgment, that's me, but we got to have the toxic part of it too. That's Odd Toxin. Toxin's gonna introduce this deck here. This is the first place deck from the first ever Toxic Judgment tournament. That top 8 replays are already up on the channel, by the way, so go check that out if you want to. But Toxin, what is this deck?
Well, what's good, YouTube? Welcome back to Team JDG, and today we're going to be going over Nikki's first place Toxic Judgment Trap Monster deck profile. A little story to start this off. When we first came out and we're like talking about deck lists, this was one of the first deck lists I got. I think it was actually the second one I did get, and second place was the first one I got. So we were talking about it, and I said these decks are weird. And I'm not just saying like regular weird, like weird in all caps. I was like, this is total copium. These aren't going to do anything in this format. And here they are, first and second place, both the decks I was talking about. And I'm just like, what? I'm always wrong. Don't listen to Toxin.
Man, when you told me trap monsters, I was like, no way. Like, there's like, why are people playing new form, not like cope in a new format where you could win $100? Like, because my mind, I was like, people are gonna stick to kind of what works and just kind of adjust as needed, right?
That's what I thought too, but it seemed like everybody was just like, we're going to have fun this tournament. And I'm not
Yeah.
against that. I come from a
No.
tournament, like a local scene, that most of the decks that show up every week are all like weird rogue style decks. Not even that, like lower than rogue at points.
Yeah.
And so I come from an area
Yes.
where we're seeing these for fun decks, and it's just nice to see a for fun deck just be like, hey, I got first place today in a $100 free to play tournament.
Right. Yeah. No, this is something. If something like this getting first place is so cool, but it's not just the cope part of the deck, right? Which is playing the trap monsters. There's also a lot of actually good cards in here that actually work to counter some of the stuff that they played against. So let's actually get into that. Actually, I'm gonna wait one second. I'm gonna continue the story. When we started the tournament, now this is not on YouTube because this is the Swiss rounds before the top cut. The first match we actually watched, round one, was this deck, right?
Yep.
And it's crazy how that came full circle to this was also the first top 8 match we watched was featuring Nikki and this deck. And then obviously we watched the finals as the last thing we watched. So like we got to see a lot of this deck, and you know what? It's actually not that bad. Like it's actually decent.
It's a really cool deck, something that you weren't really expecting to top, and then watching it play, you're just sitting there with your mouse open, and you're just like, what is going on right now? Like, it's just that interesting and good.
And it somehow just manages to work. So yeah, the matchups I was talking about. So things like Banisher, right? We know there was some Volcanic in the tournament, and we know Banisher really bothers that deck. For example, we know there was one Crystal Beasts in the tournament. Banisher really kind of bothers that, right?
Right. Right.
We were anticipating at least some Cyber Angels.
Cyber Angel. Yeah,
Uh,
even in most decks I'm playing right now, I feel like I'm trying to throw Banisher in there somewhere. So like, just because Cyber Angels and Volcanics, like you said, and just yeah, this is playing it is the correct play.
yeah. You have Warrior Lady, which again is really good for Cyber Angels in particular. But again, it's a really good card overall. It's probably the best or the second best normal summon we have in the game right now.
That
So
what was I think this is the best set as Curso said. This is the
yes,
best
yes,
set.
yeah, the best set. Yeah, yeah, best set, but also not a bad summon. We saw it summoned a lot to push for damage after
Right.
kind of your back row had done the work there to out monsters. Speaking of back row, there's a lot of it. Literally, we've gone through the 5 cards in the deck that aren't back row. You have 15 cards that are back row in this deck.
It was the coolest thing about it. Like the deck, you look at it and you're like, wow, this loses the Jinzo. But then we go on to the next card in our deck that we're playing triple copies of, and you're like, ah, it doesn't lose the Jinzo. We got Warrior Ladies, and we got Offerings to the Doom being played as 3, which is a powerful quick play spell.
Yeah. So you got 6 outs to Jinzo there, and then you could technically combine Shrink with Banisher or Warrior
Mhm.
Lady, right? Warrior Lady doesn't have to banish at that point. And you kind of got 7 ways to deal with Jinzo, which for a one of, that's I think that's enough. So it's not really a huge problem. Yeah, we did see it take one game against this deck, but I think usually when you see it, if you've like saved up your resources correctly and you've kind of like predicted Jinzo is going to be coming at some point, you should be able to deal with it.
Right. And
Uh,
another weird thing that we saw, like outside of this deck, but throughout the tournament, is people were actually not playing so much Jinzo. And that's why this deck was able to run the way that it was.
that's true.
People were on like Nightmare Wheels and Zomas now. So because of that, they were just like able to bypass through the Jinzo and not have to worry about these offerings or shrinks as much.
Yeah. No, it's definitely a meta call too. Is because now Jinzo deals with you having to choose it specifically over Nightmare Wheel and Zoma. Nobody's choosing Rhoda. Let's be honest. But Jinzo is a lot less played now. I think because people are realizing that Zoma is actually like really good again, right? Beatdown, it's really good against Beatdown.
Very
It's
good.
okay against Volcanic because it's a special summon and puts on pressure, right? And then it's actually solid against Cyber Angels because they consistently summon something that's over 3,000. So like if you can keep that Zoma alive, that's you could just win the games all of a sudden when they were the ones putting on all the pressure. So I think people are realizing Zoma is a good card, and that was the choice we saw most. We saw a couple wheels in there, right? But I think we saw
Right.
Zoma. We saw most people that were choosing to play the Zoma as their one of. Um, but we did see one Jinzo, but that's it. So yeah, you're exactly right. It's a meta call to not worry about the Jinzo as much, and that's why a deck like this can actually thrive. But again, these are the kind of things that like metas evolve, right? So like, okay,
Yeah,
there's
this
not
is
a lot
like
of Crystal Beasts. There's not a lot of Trap Monster decks. I guess I don't have to worry about Jinzo. Well, no one's playing Jinzo now. I was like, oh, I guess I can play Odeon.
hmm
But
the second
right,
Odeon's being played more, everybody's on Jinzo again.
right,
So.
right.
Like I
Yeah,
said, it's kind of reminds me of like how Relinquish plays. Like Relinquish is one of those decks where you're not going to be seeing it too much until it's like crept out of the meta, and then all of a sudden you'll see it top a tournament again. I feel like this deck is kind of evolving into that.
yeah, yeah. No, that's a perfect way to put it, right? And we actually could be seeing Relinquished. If we're right about Cyber Angels, Relinquished is a good way to counter them. So I don't know. Maybe that'll happen. Anyway, this deck obviously needs ways to deal with your opponent's back row because there's a lot of back row in the format right now in general. So 3 Dust Tornado, I think, is very good for most decks. Obviously, some decks play other things like Cosmic Cyclone. But if you're using your 3F slot on something else, I think Dust Tornado is probably the way to go. This is pretty standard. You got a bunch of trap monsters. I'm gonna skip over something because we need to talk about it.
Right.
Standard battle trap, which you're siding. No, you're siding. You're not siding more of. Just the one battle trap. I think because we still saw a lot of Joey. So the reason there's not more wall is probably just because of the Joey factor. And
Right.
then we already talked about Zoma, but there's a really interesting tech that we need to discuss here.
Now
And there's another one in the side deck.
I
Yeah.
want to talk about Magic Drain a little bit. All
Yeah.
right, because this is the interesting tech, right?
Yep.
I remember during the recording and everything, like when we were recording the tournament, with everybody, I was like, it's probably Magic Drain. I completely forgot that they had Magic Drain in this deck. I was being sus. I was just like memeing on everything, and then they activate Magic Drain. I like lost my mind.
Dude, because we always do that meme, don't we? Like whenever there's like a stream, there's a live tournament, and you're on like that's always like the joke to make, right? When opponent activates a spell, you're like, ah, it's gonna have Magic Drain. Watch, you're like, ah, it's gonna be
Right.
Trap Jammer. We were joking about Trap Jammer for like the whole tournament after that. So like that was such a cool moment, and I think it kind of shows you how powerful spells are right now. Whether that's offerings, we actually saw a lot of offerings.
It
Like,
seems to be because everybody's on Floodgates or a different 3 of right now, is that
yeah,
offerings is what's taking the place for Book of Moon.
yeah. So being able to just protect your monster with that Magic Drain is really good. Again, we didn't see Cyber Angels, but Magic Drain is good against them, right? Because you either stop the ritual or make them discard their extra ritual a lot of times. Because if they had
Right.
Cosmic, they would have just used it on your Magic Drain. So if you're making them discard their extra ritual, that's really good because then that might limit how much of a board they can build. So I think it's really good against that matchup either way. It's great against Blaze Accelerator, which we saw, right? So I mean, maybe it's time, as the community likes to say.
Yeah, I mean, it's cool to see that seeing more play, and I've been actually throwing it in as a side deck tech in a lot of my decks. Actually, recently I played it in the Dark Machine deck that I was messing around with. So can we build it? And it's just a very powerful card whenever it goes off. Like it's A, negating a spell card, or B, ripping a card from hand. Like there is no downside to this card in my opinion.
Hmm. Yeah, and something we didn't even mention because we didn't see this deck really at all, at least not on stream, was Ojama's. That
Hmm.
it again, they play Oja match, you magic drain. Well, they either have to discard something like creature swap, or just let their Oja match get negated. Either one is fine because usually without both in combo, they can't complete guaranteed OTK you through your monster. So, yeah, really good tech, and obviously you see how good it is that a second one was side decked, right?
Right.
The rest of the side deck, I think, is well, no, the three cards in side deck are nothing special, right? Two Mind Crush. The Lava Golem is interesting, but I think it's like it's understandable in a deck like this why you would side deck Lava Golem.
Yeah, you have Zoma, you have Wall, right? You have
Right,
Shrinks, Offerings. You can easily get around it. You have Metal Reflect Slime to sit in defense mode too,
right,
so it can't beat over it.
right.
So yeah, it
You,
makes sense why we see it
yeah,
here.
you got Zoma for the combo if that ever comes up, right? But there's an interesting tech in the side deck which actually might have been the reason this deck got first place in this specific tournament, and we need to
Yeah,
talk
what
about
a
that one too.
yeah, Ally of Justice Core Destroyer, Baby Catas or yeah, Ally of Justice Cataster, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Baby Cataster. And it just is the perfect XYZ out. One of the
Yep.
perfect XYZ outs. The other one I can think of is probably like Diffusion and Lost Wind. Um, and yeah, they just had this in here, and I can only assume it was in here as a spicy tech against like Cyber Angels. But because we saw so much XYZ, especially because that's our second place deck, it just was able to be a forefront for like being aggressive Wisher Trap monsters and just being able to easily clear these problematic boss monsters that get summoned every turn.
Yeah. It's interesting because actually Nikki said they didn't put this in for XYZ, but it was a lot for beatdown because
Oh,
it
yeah, that makes sense.
it hits Banisher, it hits Charging Gaia. So they'll still play Cyber Dragon sometimes, despite not being able to play like Floodgate if they do. So it kind of hits like a lot of their monsters, pretty much everything except like Jiragumo. But if Jiragumo was going to kill your Cordisher and maybe make them lose half their life points, that's you're kind of okay with that as long as you killed something first. So yeah, it's not too great against Cyber Angels, but again, you already have three cards for Cyber Angels, and you got the DD Warrior Lady and Banisher. So
Right.
yeah, I mean it's a good deck that was prepared for I think every possible matchup, and that's even though they weren't thinking about unions, they ended up being prepared for unions too. And
Right, which is so sick to even see.
yeah, it's like once this thing hit the field and it had back row behind it, what we saw was that the union player couldn't really do anything. Like it's
Like
paralyzing.
the only thing that they could really go into was going into XYZ Dragon Cannon, discarding it, and then popping it, and that still feels really bad when they also have DD Warrior Lady on the field.
Yep, exactly. And they have three offerings. So
Mm-hmm.
say you do that, well, what if your XYZ Dragon Cannon just gets offerings unsummon? Now you put your entire turn into summoning your boss monster, which immediately got offerings. And any small monster you summon will immediately just get run over by the core destroyer. So
Right.
yeah.
I think the deck that we saw was like David Unions, right? Playing against this deck. I could be wrong. But they were like utilizing all their materials from like for their skill, like banishing the materials, special
Mhm.
summoning them all back, and then being met with the core destroyer after going through all of that. It was so devastating for the deck.
Yeah, it's absolutely brutal. And with the XYZ Dragon Cannon, if the XYZ Dragon Cannon comes out first, because it has to like, I don't know, kill a warrior lady, what card effect? Then guess what? Core Destroyer can just normal summon and kill the XYZ Dragon Cannon. Like it's not even there. Right? And unlike
Right.
Warrior Lady, you don't have to wait for them to attack into it. You don't have to take damage by doing the crash, right? Core Destroyer just wins the fight. So yeah, no, really cool deck. The extra deck doesn't matter. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, I really like the alligator sword dragon tech.
No,
Came up a lot,
I do too. Yeah, for the Waking the Dragon, you don't have. Um,
right?
but in all
Um,
honesty, you could play Waking the Dragon in this deck. Like it would. The reason you wouldn't is because it would clog up your back row, right? And you don't want that. You want your back row to be
right.
free as much as possible. But the reason you would maybe is because your opponent knows you're on a lot of back row, so they might like go really hard if they have that to like just blindly blow up whatever. So I wouldn't. And you can see that Nikki made the same decision that it just doesn't make a lot of sense. So the extra deck is just a bluff. Always make a
Right.
bluff extra deck, even if it's Alligator Sword Dragon.
Unless you really want your opponent to be popping your back row, because there have been weird like scenarios where you're playing like what is it, Wild Tornado and stuff like that. So
Yeah,
they're like you're not on the waking, so hit the Wild Tornado. But I've only ever seen that come up in local scenarios.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, my bluff extra deck is 3 Dragoon, 3 Dangerous. So
Hmm.
pick your favorite 2 fusion monsters we have and make that bluff extra deck because
Mine's VWXYZ Dragon Cannon, and then it's
nice.
Super Vehic Jumbo Drill.
Nice. There you go. See? It doesn't matter because you're never gonna summon it. So who cares? It couldn't be anything you
Right.
want it to be. There's no way for
Um,
your opponent to give you their waking, and then even if they do, you don't activate it. They do. So yeah.
Something we didn't go over for this deck was the skill card.
Oh, you're right. Yeah.
Yeah,
You know
that's
what?
Guardians of the Tomb, by the way.
Yes, it is. Let's see if Dueling Book will let me pull that up. There it is. Limit one up apparently, but
Yeah, it's too
yeah,
powerful.
yeah,
Gotta put it at one so you can't play Jinzo with your trap monsters.
easy. There you go. It makes complete sense. All right. So yeah, um, yeah. No, this skill is the reason you would ever play a trap monster deck, right?
Right.
The ability to plus one multiple times a game is really good. And what we saw was that you don't have to do it every turn.
No.
As long as you can get like 3 draws, 3 free draws per duel, that's enough.
I mean,
And
yeah,
yeah, and the way your deck works is that it's going to slow the game down, right? So you have enough time, you have enough turns to get that off 3 times per duel. Look, people are on David, like we just talked about, which is 1 draw every duel, right?
right.
We're talking you can get 3 free draws per duel.
Right. And
Like,
you can potentially set a trap monster face down to go aggressive with it next turn when it's your turn.
yeah, yeah. And that's the reason to only play the trap monsters with attack points. Obviously, slime is the exception, but
Mhm.
most of your trap monsters you're playing with attack points, right? You're not playing 3 slime, you're not playing quantum cat, right? You're not going defensive with this deck. You want to take advantage of the skill by setting up to push if you have the chance to do that.
Right.
But yeah. All right. Do you
Yeah.
have any final thoughts on this deck?
Hey, look out for the next Toxic Judgment. You're going to see it in the Speed Duel League Discord once we release the Shadow Rider box. So, yeah, there's going to be, videos talking about it on my channel. I'm sure that you're going to see stuff being advertised on Speed Duel League. So, yeah, just look forward to the next one.
Yeah, and check out Toxin's channel in the description below the link if you're not already subscribed to him over there. But that does it for this video. Again, a really cool deck. Good to see it topping. Maybe Odeon will make the tier list for this format. Who knows?
Fingers crossed.
Keep playing it. I saw there's actually some people playing it in Winnabox right now too. So
Oh,
anything,
interesting. That's so cool.
yeah. So anything is possible. But until then, I will see you next time, and I'm sure Toxin will also be back at some point. It was good having you here.
Yeah,
But
thanks for having me.
yep, Terramaster and Toxin, we're out.
Bye bye.